All right. So, afternoon, evening, good morning, everyone, depending on your region or location. I'm super excited to welcome to day five of the machine learning, AI and ML bootcamp. So, actually, AI agent is one of the core technologies out there, and as a community, as an open source community, it's what we do is we have these sessions, we teach people about using AI to solve their local problems, solve their local challenges. So from Monday till now, we have been having this session, and today is nothing new. So to give a brief overview of what we have been doing so far, I'll just go ahead and share my screen. All right, so I believe you all can share my screen. So first, I would like to thank the organizing members and partnering communities. This program is brought to you by Machine Learning Uyo in collaboration with Python Community Uyo, Python Community Anambra, Computer Vision Africa, Talents AI, New Lens AI, and as well other and speakers we have. So I'm super grateful to everybody who has been joining us from day one and up to this moment. I'm very happy. I mean, it means so much to me. And we have a lot of RSVPs, a lot of registration, and people indicating interest to join us. So starting from day one, we talked about introduction to AI agents, where we talked about what is an AI agent, how does AI agents reason, how do we build an AI agent, how do we understand the theoretical concept of AI agent, and we covered all the topics like React reasoning, using tools, how does AI, the different kinds of AI we have, AI agents we have, the different ways they work, using text, using code, using JSON, and also on day two, we also talked about practical, the basic, the first steps to integrating AI agents, right? We also talked about that was what we covered in the two, and we're able to execute simple things like function calling. How do you make an agent call tools like adding or subtracting a particular a particular tool. So those were the things we covered. And on day three, we talked about we did building AI agents where we built an enterprise support customer agent in which we integrated tools and functionality like memory, function calls, and being able to fetch live data from Mongo database, and those who join that session, they're able to see and then have the flow of how this session works. So this was the session we had: intelligence, building intelligence customer support agents, integrating transactional data, conversational memory, and context-aware service delivery. So yesterday we looked at building conversational data agents, turning that natural language into SQL with LLMs and DocDB. So our speaker did do well to demystify the understanding of querying and then answering deep insights from just natural language. So the agent was able to, go into get your data, you now transform it into it to call different tools like query, SQL, and you'll be able to answer information about your data sets. And I actually have a good news to share today. And all our sessions and playlists are being recorded, which will be made available via the community groups. So if you are not in our community, do well to join so that you don't miss out on anything. And for today, we're looking at smart budget optimizer, leveraging agentic AI for autonomous financial planning and optimization. Okay, our speaker for today, Aniekutmfon Ekere, who is a senior AI engineer at Turing incorporation is going to take us hands-on on building smart budget optimizer. So before I'll call on our speaker, if you look at the repository, we have all the code uploaded there. So please, at the end of the boot camp, we are going to send out projects. So please do well to participate in this project. So at this moment, we don't have, since I'll just jump right away. We have spent time already. So with all privilege, I mean, Mr. Aniekutmfon is a very, very good friend of mine. I mean, he has past experience building AI agents, and we are going to see how we are going to leverage these tools to build advanced smart budgeting agent. So I'm super, super grateful, Mr. Aniekutmfon, for joining us. So, Mr. Aniekutmfon Ekere.
Hello. I believe you guys can hear me, right? Hello, you can hear me, just
I hear you.
say hi. All right, thank you. First off,
So,
let's see if I
uh,
can.
yeah, so just before you continue, looking at your experience, you have gotten being able to work as a senior AI engineer at Story. I mean, that's really, really great. And I mean, like, what can you share about your journey? What were the things you did differently? And how were you able to grow from just an AI engineer to be able to work in such such a big company and growing and building your knowledge base?
All right, guys. I'm an Aniekutmfon, and I would say I'm a software engineer, right? And my focus has always been solving problems. Um, so far, I started out just mostly focused on solving problems, and then picking up the tools I need to pick up, right, while doing them. Because at the end of the day, if you're an engineer and you don't solve a problem, then you are not that means you're not an engineer, right? So, um, in as much as companies want to hire, majority of the time is that they have a specific problem they want you to come and solve, and so um, I believe that if you focus on the problems they need you to solve, and then you possess the required skills, right? Then it's going to be easy for you to like grow in your journey. So I will say that has been the major reason why I've been able to navigate into most of these companies. So it has always been a case of the company has their expectation, and then when they meet you, and then you have all the required skills, right, at that time, because their requirement do changes. Okay, so if they have all the required skills at that time, then they will definitely pick you. So that has just been it, and I hope I'll be able to like at least give more information. Someone is raising their hand. Uh,
Mr. Clement, your hand is raised. Go ahead to speak.
Sorry, I've been translating and your voice is a bit low, so I don't know if you can raise your voice a bit.
So,
okay, I think we
did
can
you ask a
continue.
question?
Okay, the organizer is going to provide you with that. Yes. All right. So, Victor, I hope I answered your question, or do you need more elaboration? Hello, Mr. Victor.
Yes, so you have some video, and you just go ahead and take over the session. Thank you.
All right. Okay. So, today's section, I'm going to be showing you how I built an AI tool to be able to get data from an expenses. So, let's say in a case where you have um, your daily recorded expenses, right? Your day-to-day expenses, and then you're like, what can I do to reduce these expenses, right? Because sometimes you just have money in your account before you know it's gone, right? So I'm going to show you, like, the tool is just very simple and straightforward. So I I believe simplicity is always key at the end of the day. So the tool is very simple and straightforward. So what it does is that it picks up a, a file, right? So you upload a file, and then it gets the data of the file, then analyze it, and then come out with a breakdown of your expenses, and then make some suggestions on what you could do to, like, tune down your expenses. All right. So yes, let me share my screen. Okay, so here is this thing. Here is the UI I built. So what I did is I used Steamlit to build the UI so that it's going to at least look presentable, right? And so all you do here is you just upload the file. So I already upload the file, though it takes a bit of time. So that's why I have to keep this. Yeah, so I uploaded this my expenses data, and then process it, and then it shows me these are the category. It tells me things I need to reduce, like reduce food expenses, like planning meal, giving suggestion that consider sharing household expenses, roommates, use public transport instead of driving to reduce fuel costs. So it just, like, gives suggestions on what can be done to reduce the expenses I have. Okay. And so depending on if the data set is much, it can, like, give you more suggestion, and depending on if uh, the model is being fine-tuned to handle financial data, right? So its performance can be improved. At this point, I don't want it to be basic. So this is just the UI, but let me show you the codes. All right, so first thing first, I'm using launching, right? I believe at this point, maybe most of you have attended the other sections, and a lot of explanation has been done on agentic AI tooling and the rest, but I can just go through a brief of what it is so that in case you didn't attend any of those sections, then you can at least uh, grab a bit of what it's all about. So, so we have LLM, right? And LLM just make predictions, right? You ask a question, it responds to those questions, right? But there are always needs to take it a step further. Kind of, I don't just want you to, like, interface respond with the text. So I don't want the interface to only be a text interface. So I may want it to be something else. I may want it to do some other things, right? So that's when the agentic part comes into play. So the agent uses the model, right? It uses the model as a brain, while the model tells the agent what to call, so the agent can call it. So in that case, since we have cases where we can call functions, right? And like, functions can be integrated with external things, external automation, automated systems. So you can, like, integrate your function with maybe your light bulb, right? So you might have, like, kind of a Wi-Fi system that is talking to maybe Raspberry Pi, and then that's connected to your machine, and then with that, signals can be sent to your devices. Those signals can be converted to some specific encoded commands which call your functions, right? And this communication can be done back and forth. And the ability to be able to have that power now, you could control a lot of things, right? So you can extend those controls to other things. And so that's where the tooling comes in. So the tooling, just the agent uses the LLM to make decisions, and then the LLM decides which tool to call. The agent calls the tool, get the response, give it back to the LLM. And based on whatsoever the agent needs to do, it might just like, if it gets the required information, it might return it to you or perform some action at the end of the day. Okay, so that's just the concept of agentic AI, and then the tooling, where the tooling comes into play. Now there are different languages, right? And there are different libraries that are being used to kind of implement agentic applications, right? I know recent these guys came out with their own version. It's a pedantic agent. It's AI. Is it pedantic AI? Pedantic AI. Yes. So pedantic AI also came out with their own, but this one is still new. It's lacks some stuff, but I've tried bits. I think there's a whole lot of potential here because uh, since Pydantic works very well with fast API, and this is done with Pydantic, then I believe it's going to be much better. But then it's new, so it doesn't really have a lot, right? So yeah, so that's why I prefer using LangChain, because LangChain is like more concrete and standardized, right? So today I'm going to use this my implementation. I'm using LangChain to implement the agentic AI parts, and then I'm using Steamlit to render the UI. And so all I do here is to first decide what do I want to build and the workflow. So since this has to do with data, I prefer using pandas, right? Because pandas is able to handle data efficiently. So I create a function that is going to load my data. So it takes in the parts, load my data. And also I assume that this data set might not have the required category. So I decided, okay, to kind of use the description of those expenses to see how I can suggest a category for it. And so that's what this function does, right? So we go to this simple category, this particular function. So all it does is just check the description, right? And then check if some of these words are included in the description. And then with that, you can just suggest what category it is. And so that's it. This just sets the category. And I got my data set online, right? At first, it was carrying the amounts was in Indian currency. So I had to just find a way to convert it. This might actually be useful. And I created another function. All this does is it takes the data sets and then group it. Based on the grouping, it sums the amount. So for each of the category, it sums the amount. Let me see. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So this is like the data sets, right? So all this does is it contains the dates the purchase was made, contains the category, some notes, the amount, whether it was expenses or income, and then currencies, naira. So this just group it and then some the value. And then I implemented three implemented three tools. So one of it, the first one, what it does is to pull the data, convert it to string, so that if the model wants to get the raw data and not the group data, it can just get it and use that to make decisions on what it needs to do. While the second tool is to summarize the spending. So, not seeing your screen, sir. Can you guys see my screen? Is it blurry?
Yeah, I think it's network. think it's network.
Okay, it's network. Okay. All right. So
Or
the
can you
next
just end sharing and start again?
um okay, give me a minute. Can you see it? Can you see my screen? Okay.
Yes, I can.
All right. So yeah. So the next tool is to get the data, while the next one is to get like loads of the data and then gets a summarized value of the data. So it just summarizes data by just grouping it, and then for each of the category it gets the total the sum. Right. And then the last one, what it does is it takes an input from the LM and then use that to obviously to give suggestion the optimize projects, right? So that's what this does. And I'm using LangChain. So I instantiated two models. And these models I'm using are open source models. So I'm using open source model and I'm using it with Olama, right? So if you don't know what Olama is, you can always go to like the Olama website and glance through it. So you can always go to olama.com and go through it. Olama is just a software that helps you to run any open source model locally, right? So it has a acceptable formats which you can just convert your model into, and then with that you'll be able to run it with Olama. It's free to use. So I'm running it with Olama, and the Olama is on my PC. It's already installed on my PC, and the model that I needed has been pulled to that. So so if I do Olama, this account is to show me the formats, and then the model I'm using is Llama 3.2, which is a Meta open source Llama. And I'm also using this other model. So these are the models I've put into my PC. We have DeepSeek, the rest of it. So the model I'm using is this Llama 3.2, which is Meta open source model. And then the second model I'm using is this Llama Grok 2 use. So this has been an optimized model to work perfectly well with the tooling, right? So which is this one here, just put it to my PC. Right. So once I do that, I import the chat Olama class from here. So I import that and then I give it a temperature of 0.5. I want it to be a bit creative, but not too creative, so that it doesn't mess around with my output, right? I want it to give me a consistent output. And then I bind the tool. So I already imported this this decorator function from Olama. You can see it, right? So with Olama, all you need with LangChain, if you want to create a tool, an agentic tool, you just create a function, give it a good doc string that's going to explain what the function does, right? And then just like I did here, and then import the decorator and then add it to your function. So that's what I did here, right? And it's important to give it a doc string and probably give it a type int uh, so that the agent is going to know what the function does, right? So once I've set up which function are tool, I just pass in those functions here, and that's phase one. That returns me. So it's the Olama, then inside the model, give a temperature, bind the tool, I get my model. And here I'm just creating an hash map containing the key, which is like the function name, and then the tool name, and then the tool functions, right? I have specific use for it. And then once I'm done with that, I create my response function. So this is like the main entry point function. So what this does is it takes in the prompts and then it constructs the message in such a way that
So we are only still seeing your Llama screen mode.
oh, you are still seeing my Llama screen. Can you see this?
Yes.
Wait, can you see the VS Code?
No, only with Llama.
Are you kidding me? Wait. Um,
Maybe you can
probably,
just share your entire screen.
yes. I thought that's what I did. Oh, I see. Sorry guys. Can you see my screen now?
Oh wow, this is see what you missed.
Oh, I see. Sorry about that. I thought I had shared my entire screen.
Yes, can see now.
Okay, so at what point were you guys lost? Did
I
you get
think
it to the
from
the
here,
part from here? Okay.
like we can just continue from here.
All right. So okay. So from here, what I said was like right now there are a lot of packages or libraries that are being built so that developers can use to create agentic applications, right? And the one that is really trending is LangChain. The LangChain is the one that is really trending, especially for Python uh, community, right? So LangChain is the one that's really trending. It has like a concrete implementation for a whole lot of things related to LLM and agents. But Pydantic is like a new one that has come out, and since Pydantic is really like being used in majority of the projects that's related to data, they came up with a library related. They call it Agentic AI, which you could also use to create agentic tools. The library makes sense because like it makes creating agents quicker. The only problem is that it's not comprehensive because it's kind of new, right? So it's not really uh, comprehensive. So, all right, so it's not really comprehensive, right? So it's kind of still new. And so that's why most times I use LangChain. Okay, so now the implementation I did is more of a tool that gets your expenses data sets, right? So for example, if you are using all this fintech app, you realize you have like you can export your bank statements and then all I think bank statements they don't really like categorize your expenses well, but some of the app they have information about your expenses, the category of the expenses and the rest, right? So let's say you have those data sets, right? Or you have those data, then the tool what the tool does is that it takes in the data, analyze your expenses, and then give a suggestion on how you can reduce those expenses, right? What you can adjust. And so this is the data set I'm using. I believe you guys can still see it. Let me check. Okay.
Yes, we can
Okay.
see the yeah, you can see your screen.
So this is the data set I'm using, and this data set contains these columns, which shows the dates which I spent the money, the category, some notes, right, and then the amounts, whether it was expenses or income, and then the currency. All right, or the currency. So that's what it does, and so, and then here is a tool. I think I already showed this tool. So what it does is you just upload the data sets, you upload the data sets, and then it analyzes it, right? And then give suggestion, oh, you should do this. Like this one suggests reduce your food expenses by planning meals and avoiding eating out. Consider sharing house expenses with room mates, save money, use public transportation instead of driving a car to reduce cost. focus. So it's just giving suggestions, which this is just simple and straightforward, right? In a case where you want to like optimize it, then you can do model fine tuning to work perfectly well with specific data. Maybe use all these financial optimization calculations and then embed it into the model. So yeah, so let's go to the code base so that I can just show you out what I did. So first thing, I installed the required tools, the required packages. So I install LangChain, install Pandas, which I like using for things that has to do with data or data transformation. Install Olama, Python version, install LangChain, and then LangChain community, because with LangChain you cannot use Olama. So LangChain community helps too. The community created extension that you can use to integrate things with Olama. So that's why I needed to install this. And then Streamlit is just to generate UI, because I don't have the time to sit down, build HTML, anything. So I just prefer using Python. So with the Streamlit, I can just use Python to generate my UI. All right. So let's get into the implementation. So all I did here was to import the Olama, the chat Olama, import the tool, the corrector, the system message, and the human message, right? And then I instantiated Olama LLM. So now there are different models you can use to integrate your tool, your application, right? I know that open AI models are always very, very effective because they are like paid ones, right? Those ones are effective. But in the case where you want to test things out, right? You don't want to start spending money, right? Else your money will finish just testing things. So in those cases, you want to like play around with the existing open source model. And so for you to use those models, maybe let's say you have access to those model files, you cannot just use it directly. So you need something that can interface with it. And that's why we were using Olama, which I believe I explained earlier. So it's just an application that helps you to communicate with your model, right? You can create a model and just add it to Olama and you'll be able to communicate with it. So I'm using open source models. I'm using Llama 3.2 model, and then I'm setting the temperature to 0.3 so that it can be creative, right? So I want it to be a bit creative for this. And this model, the purpose of this model is to suggest optimization for the model, right? I'm using two models. Like come down here, you're going to see this other one that I use. So this one is Llama 3 model, but it is optimized for tooling, right? So yeah. So after creating this model, which is going to use make suggestions, and then I created the require functions. The first function was just to load my data. So I have my data sets here, which is the data I showed you earlier. This one was the raw data. I just had to like transform the data to this to make it very simple, right? So this function, what it does is just to pull in the data, and then this what it does is to set category. So if category does not exist, it just sets it, right? So initially the data was using didn't really have category, so I had to create this to pull in the category to generate category from the description of the expenses. And this one was used to transform the data. So just clean up the data a bit. This is where the category suggestion was being done, right? And then what this does is this, after loading the data as a data frame, the pandas data frame, what this does is it summarizes the data. So if you use SQL, right, just like group by in SQL, so it groups the data by category and then get you the sum of each of the amounts, right, which is the sum of this, right, sum of the amounts here. So, and then return a string version of it so that the LM can get the data and know what to do with it. While this function, what it does is to just pull in the data as a data frame and then convert it to a string so that the LM can get the entire data set if it wants to, and then maybe make decisions based on those data sets. And then the last function, what it does, this just use summarize pending. So this uses this function. But since the LM is going to be able to send in a string, instead it might not be able to send in a data frame, right? So that's why I have to like implement this function so that it gets the string, which is the path to the file, and then loads in the file, converts to data frame, and then return the string version of the data set. While this just gets the data frame, this gets the file, get the data frame, pandas data frame, and then pass it to this function to get the summary, right? And the last one is to optimize. So it gets an input of the data in specific format based on how the LM send it to it, right? And then pass it into this prompt. So it's already give like some hints, right? Google budgeting assistant. A user has the following spending summary. So it gets the spending summary and then it gives personalized suggestions to reduce your expenses. So that's what this does. And if you observe, right, I explained tooling, right? So in this case, for LangChain, the way to create a tool is to just create a function, then give it a good description of what the function does using the docstring, so that way the LM is able to know what the function does and decide when to use it. And then you have to also decorate it with this tool function, which go to the top of the file. You see where I imported it here. Okay, so each of the files each of the functions that so I just have decorators on it as well. And then once I'm done with that, I have to create my model using the charts Olama class, right? I have to create instantiate my model with this, passing the model, which I'm using this so that this is optimized for tooling with agents, right? And then I give it temperature of 0.5. I want it to be like 50-50 in terms of being creative and being strict. And then I bind it with tooling. So you have to like do it this way to like bind this LM with your tool so that it knows how to it knows the tools are available to it, right? And then handle it. And then I created this dictionary because the way this works is that first you have to pass in your prompts to the LM. The LM is going to generate, is going to decide the tools to call and then the arguments to those tools. Because what the LM does is that, functions, well, the way function works is just you pass in your arguments, call it, and then get a response. So the way the agent is going to do it is that it's going to decide what function to call and then generate an argument that needs to be passing. That's all it does. So the initial step is for it to decide, okay, based on these prompts, these are the functions I'm going to call and these are the arguments I'm going to use to call it. And then once it does that, I'm going to now construct those information and then pass it back to LM for the final response to be generated, right? So that's how it works. So for me to be able to like know which tools to call, that's why I created this dictionary, which you're going to see here, right? So after that, I created my response function and then construct my messages. All right. So the first thing I need to construct the system prompts, and the next one is the alpha prompts. Now, the system prompt is very important because the system prompt is where you tell the LLM how to behave. So you are telling it, okay, this is who you are, and this is what you need to do, and this is how you need to provide the output formats, right? And in most cases, you can also specify how it needs to get the inputs, right? The structure of the input. So that's what the system prompt does. And what I tell it here is, so you are an helpful AI assistant specialist in budgeting expenses. I gave you some information, some guide that the pricing should be in Naira. Because at first I realized it's misbehavior and was sending in dollars. I had to like be very specific. Give me my output in Naira. And also give it hints on what tools to use, right? Because if you let it that way, it's just going to do what it wants to do. But at some point, you can also fine tune it with the system prompts to guide it on which boundaries, right, it should not go out of. So based on that, I decide, okay, these are the tools you should use to do this. So I'm saying use get data set to get the expensive data set, and just also telling it to use summary spending tools to get some other information. And lastly, I'm telling it how it should structure the output, right? So that it doesn't structure the output in the wrong format, right? That's all the system prompts, and this one is like the normal prompts. And once I'm done with that, I invoke it. So once I invoke it, it's going to give me those outputs in the output is not going to be like the final response. It's going to be a dictionary, a list of it's going to be a dictionary, then it's going to have the tool calls. So it's going to tell me the tools that are being the LM is trying to call, and also the arguments the LM generated for me to call it, right? And so I'm going to get the tools, which is just the functions. I'm going to get the tools that were involved, and then I'm going to invoke those tools. And then I'm going to pass in the response of those tool calls. Remember, I have access to the argument, and I have access to the tool that's going to be called. So I just call it with the arguments with this data, right? And then the tool is able to extract the argument and then to get the message, the response of the tool calls. And then I put everything together in the messages and then do the final invoking of the message. And then I get my response. So here is just how it is. So I'm just returning the actual response in string so that I can render it on my app. And then the other one is just message, which is not really important for my app at this point. And that's it. I'm just creating an entry point functions, which could make things simple, because here you receive the prompt and then return a response. But since my app is more of is not like a chatting interface, it's more of you upload a file and then it gets the content of the file and then pass it to the main function. So in that case, I had to get the entry point function, which when I upload the file is going to. So when I upload this file, right, it's going to pass the file down to my function, and then it's going to construct a prompt. So with the prompt is just telling the LM summarize my expenses from this file. So it's the input file, right? And suggest ways on how I can reduce my expenses. So that's how the prompt is, right? So I want to make this more, should I say, production level way. I would use this thing called prompt templates, right? But this is more straightforward and simple for everyone to at least understand, right? So it's just constructing a prompt using F-string, and that's it. So that's all for the coding part. Then for the interface, if you check, it's here. It's just straightforward. Setting what the page does, the title of the page, and then translating an uploader. And then what I'm doing is I get the file content. I create a temporary file, which is here. This file is being uploaded here, right? So when you upload it, just create it. And you can also use like a temporary directory on your PC. So you can use the temporary file using Python inbuilt functions. But I decided not to. I just decided to just make this simple, straightforward. So I get in the file and then create a path, upload the file contents to that file, and then while it's spinning, I just pass in the file path to the main function which I imported here, right? And then it does its thing, return the output as a markdown. That's it. So that's just the implementation. It's just very, very straightforward implementation. And so once you upload your file, it gives you this output. At times it gives me a structural output. At times it's kind of mess around with the format. But since this is an open source model, we don't need to pay. It's expected. So I could easily just upload. I hope this is running. I can just upload this, and hopefully it's this. Hopefully it does still gonna give out the perfect format. So yeah, so that's just the whole implementation of the application. I don't know if anybody has any questions. Hello, I believe you guys can see me.
Yeah, yes.
So this does its thing, normal uploaded. I believe it's the temperature that I optimize it, so that's why it's still not misbehaving. So like upload a file, it's already does the total expenses, start the category, then make the suggestions. Right, view transportation expenses, consider blah blah blah. Yeah. So that's just it. Do you guys have any question? Can ask. I think open to questions. Okay. I think no question as of now. All right, I think that's it. And thank you so much for your time. Victor.
All right.
All right.
So thank you so much for the amazing session. I mean, looking at the things you have done, and so let, in most cases, or let me say, in instances where I think I just have to come on, yeah, we don't get the structural output you are looking for. What are the techniques you can use to handle that?
Okay, so Launching has a parser. So let me see. Let me check. Give me a minute. Let me check. Think. Let me see. Okay, so let me bring in this. Let's see. This. Okay, I believe you can see my screen, right? I believe you can see my screen. So, all right. So LangChain has a parser, right? So the parser, what it does is that with the parser, you can have like a structural output using Pydantic, right? This is one of the demo I created, right? So with this parser, I can have like a Pydantic schema, right? So I can tell it with this Pydantic schema, this is the structure, right? And can decide what the structure of the data is going to be, right? So if you are familiar with Pydantic, you understand what I mean, right? But if you're not familiar with Pydantic, it's the same thing as TypeScript, right? Kind of like TypeScript where you get a structural data, right? The structural way of how you want your data to be. And so this is the same thing. So you can create your types, and then once you're done, you can use the parser, right? And then with the pattern now, you can tell your model how the output is going to be. You can also tell it how the input is going to be as well, right? So if you have an application where the output needs to be a specific structure and it doesn't change, then you can always use that parser to decide. So this is file downstream, yes. So that's it. So that way you can have a structural way of representing your data. Yeah, just want it to be very straightforward so that I don't have to build custom UI, because if you want to use a parser, if you have a structural way of your data coming in, then that means you need to customize the UI to be able to render it the way you want it to be. Yeah. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, you have answered the question amazingly well. Thank you very much. So I don't know if you have any other question from those joining us. So it's really great to see how we have this assistant and this AI agent being able to do the things that would normally take time or take a very long period of time for humans to do. So do you have any other question? All right. So in the absence of no question, I'll just give I can let me share my screen. Oh,
All right.
okay. Sorry, there's a question. Yeah, you can go ahead. Okay. So the question is, I'll just use it. Um, what are the best ways to handle mess or unexpected output from language models? Because most times we have to deal with hallucinations.
Okay, so
Um,
yeah, so the
yeah, go ahead.
best way to handle hallucination when it comes to like production level implementation is to fine tune the model. That's always like the number one route to take. So um, number one is try to fine tune the model. So um, get like predefined data sets that are tuned to what you want the model to do, right? And then fine tune the model, the base model, right, with those data sets. So that way, when you are using the model for what you want to use it for, right, it's already has like um, the model is already structured to work with what you want, right? So that's one way. Two is to use the rack system where you have like um, a database or a knowledge base of information, so that way the model doesn't just um, answer based on its already existing data. So it can always use your data source as a reference to like to adjust to adjust its response. So, and I believe like in case of this, it's more of you are using an open source model, which is maybe it's a bit light, right? Yeah, but then if you're using all these IM models, like all these open AI models that are very, very good and trained, then the hallucination is going to be reduced. Yeah, I hope I've answered your question. All right.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. I mean, we still have like more people turning the question, but I'll just ask this question this time for on behalf of participants. So most of the questions we do ask is how do we even know the kind of approach to use or let me say, how do you get started with a particular project? It's more like saying, how do you design an agentic system? Just giving like a problem statement. And for, for someone who just wants to get into building AI agents, what are the best things or best ways to get started? Can you hear me?
Oh, sorry, I muted. I believe you can hear me now, right? You can hear
Yes.
me, right? Okay, so the first thing you need to do is to decide which tools you want to use, right? Because if you're a Python developer, you have to decide, okay, which tools do I want to use, which tool am I comfortable with. It's best to always go with something you're very comfortable with, right? So you can decide to use LangChain, you can decide to use um, Agentic AI, you can decide to use this N8N. So if you are not really a developer, like really strong developer, you can just use N8N, which is more of no code. And once you decide the tool you want to use, you have to accept the fact that you cannot just throw AI into everything. You have to analyze your problem statements and know if it can be solved without AI, right? So if it can be solved efficiently without AI, then you don't need to use AI. If it cannot be solved, um, so if it cannot be solved with, if you need still need AI to solve it, then you can now decide to go with it, right? So once that is done, you can now decide on, when you decide, okay, I'm going to use AI agent AI in this problem, then you can now decide on what model do I need to use, right? Because based on your problem, the model you need to use might not be what other people are using, right? For example, I learned that Mistra is really good with Z2Lin, right? I think this one is just this ones I'm using is, I just saw it of recent, so I'm trying to play around with it, right? This particular model, uh, Llama 3 crop tools, right? So I'm just trying to play around with it, but I guess I learned Mistra is good, but at some point, Mistra did not perform well in the other demo I was creating. So that's just it. So at that point, once you decide the tool, you have to decide which model you want to use, and you have to know each of the models their capability, because one model might be good with giving a description of something, but it's not good with more complex calculation. Another model might be good with calculation, but it's not good with giving brief description. Some model might just be giving too much of information and not concise, right? So once you decide that, then if your problem statement is really large, you can break it down. You don't need to just push prompt at once into your model to solve a problem, right? So for example, I had to like create 3 different tools, right? For this, I can also even decide to like break down my model into multiple stuff, right? So if it's like a production level, um, if it's a production level application, I can further break down. I can even just make it such that one model and do one specific task that it is really good in. So that way I can always specify the model to get. So can do that. And so when you have your current statement, try and break it down. Don't make it too big so that you just fit the model at once and expect it to do too much, right? And then once that is done, you can now decide if the model can do this thing on its own or whether you need external tools. So if the model can do it on its own, then it's fine. You don't need tools. You don't need agentic tools. But if you still need to have an external data, for example, maybe you want to do you want to perform a search with search engines. So in that case, you need a tool, right? Or let's say you want to just communicate with an external source, right? Then at that point you need a tool, right? So you need a tool at that point. So once that is decided, then you can decide whether you want to maybe fine-tune your model if you have the money and the resources. If you don't have, at least you can just use maybe a small rack system, right? Uh, Rack is a retrieval augmented generation, right? So you can use a rack system in which you can just have a small data knowledge base, right? And then your agent is going to use the knowledge data sets to be able to know how to get to the response, right? And so once that is set, you can now decide the final output, the input and the output, because definitely not all the input is always from a chat interface. Some inputs might be from maybe a webhook. So you might have an input that is coming from a webhook. Maybe if it's like some companies have external companies they are working with or they are partnering with, which those companies will send a webhook data into their system, and their system is going to the process and send that data back to a source, a destination, right? It might be maybe a story bucket for that company. It might be maybe an API endpoint, right? Whatever it is. So you have to decide what input is coming. So once that is done, so you can decide how you want to structure your inputs, how you want to structure your prompts, because in my own case, I'm structuring this prompt this way. So let's say this part was coming, let's say this part was the part of an S3 bucket, right? So that means maybe I'm working with a company that's the company is sending in a JSON data from an API into my webhook. My webhook receive that and then extract the S3 part, right? The S3 part is now passing here, right? So my prompt is already constructed. So this does its job, and then the format is back. So good. You asked me that question of format, how we can be sure that the output format is always precise. So in that case, since I already know that the response I'm going to send back to the company has to be in a certain format, then I have to use a parser. So I can use Pydantic parser, which is the one I like using the most, because why not? Pydantic is nice to use. So I can use Pydantic parser to pass the output, and also to make sure to tell the model this output has to be in this format. So once I get that, I can now send it back. So once you are done with that, you at least you are done with 80% of your job. The last 20% is the deployment, right? Because now, apart from having your model working, your code working, you have to deploy the models in a machine that will make it run efficiently and also always available, right? Because most companies don't want to hear downtime. They don't want to even hear, oh, it stopped working for a while. They don't want that. So it has to always be highly available. So you have to think of which machine am I going to run it on? Am I going to have like replicas of the system? Because at least have redundant system so that if one should break down, the other one is still there, right? That way it's going to be highly available. And once you are set with deployment, then you are good. Last one will be security. Just make sure you safeguard your model. Someone doesn't pollute your model, right? So once you have your code as well, everything is structured. The input data is structured, output is structured, the deployment is working, and then security is top notch. Then you are good. The other part, you do the marketing part, which that one is always maybe the company always handle that part. You get. So that's just it for. I believe I've give like a comprehensive breakdown on the process you could take.
Yes, you have. Like actually, I mean, you just talked about you have given a high level overview. I mean, this has been a problem to a lot of people, and you talked about security. I think a lot of people don't focus more on security of these agents. So I mean, you have really done well. So we also have questions here and in the chat section.
Is it
So one
possible?
of the questions is it possible to combine multiple models or APIs in one blockchain workflow?
Yes, it's very possible. So it's possible to combine a multiple model and multi AI, like what I did here, right? So if you check this code, right? This is one model. This is one model, and this model is responsible for the tooling part, right? The tooling part. And then inside one of these tools, think it was this one. Inside this, I'm using an R model here. You can see it, right? So there are multiple ways you can do that. So you can combine multiple model inside the tool. So you can have like for example, let me think of a possible system in which I can do that. So okay, so let's say I want to create a system that generates maybe content for me, right? System that generates content, right? And the input is going to be my voice, like sound, right? Probably I like speaking, right? So I'm not really good with writing. So I now decide, okay, maybe I can just sit down and talk about the content, right? With Word, and then it's going to record it and then convert it to content for me to just maybe write or publish or something, right? So in that case, I might have my quote might record my audio, but then I might want to fine-tune that audio, maybe remove noise, right? Analyze it, convert the audio to text, right? And make sure that everything is perfectly well, maybe fix grammar and the rest of the things. So in those cases, I'll have my codes taking the inputs, and the audio input is going to be passed into a model that analyze, remove audio, and the rest of it, and then convert the audio to text. And then the text is going to be passed into another model that gets the information and then is more creative to give a comprehensive information, like creates the more comprehensive content for me that is nice and eye-catching, right? And then probably I might have another model that formats the outputs in a very specific structure, right? So in that case, it's 3 model. So what I can likely do is I could create a tool. So each of the models might be a tool, right? And then I can have one model that just handle the deciding where data goes to. So that's one way I can do it. So in that case, I'll just use this pattern of tooling. Another one I can do is I can do chaining, in which long chain, you can have the first model gets it's kind of like a pipeline, right? So the first model gets the first input, do what it has to do with it, gets to give an output. The output goes to the next model. The next model gets that, do what it has to do with it, and then the output goes to the final model, and then the output is now returned back to me, right? So I can see use that pattern. So those are like the 2 patterns I've used most of the time. Yeah. That's it. I hope that explains it, right?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That's really compressed.
All right.
And lastly, we have okay. So please, if you are not in our mailing list, that is the official Google page, so that you can get an email notification every time okay. So we have a question, Mr. Israel. Feel free to ask your question. Okay. So the question is, can I start agentic AI without learning generative AI?
Can I start agentic AI without learning generative AI? Yes, of course. You don't have to. You don't have to. You don't have to even know how LLM works. Like, okay, you need to know how to, like, LLM is being used, right? But you don't know. You don't need to know how it works on a very low level cases, right? So far you know how to, like, you just know how LLM works. You give it prompt and give response, then you are fine, right? It's only when you want to go deep down, optimization and the rest of it, that's when you might need to, like, learn generative AI and the rest. But you have to understand that most companies, they do division of labels, right? So they would likely already have a team that is handling a model, like, or data engineer, data scientists are handling optimizing the models. And most cases, you might only be required to, like, use it right? Most companies will not even give you access to a whole lot of things to begin with. Like imagine having a model that most the companies are really relying on, right? They're not going to give access to everybody. It's only going to be teams that are responsible for fine-tuning the model. So they might just give you access to use it. Yes. So in that case, you don't really need to know everything about generative AI before you can build your tool.
Okay,
You get that?
that's great. I believe the question is answered. So, okay, thank you so much for the response. All right, good. So, I mean, we have answered a lot of questions in this particular session. I mean, we spent like close to have 20 minutes answering just questions. And our session continues next week um, on Monday and Wednesday. So next week we'll actually go into more advanced topics like deploying AI agents. So if you are not in our mailing list, please do well to join so that you can get real-time notification via email about all of our activities. I've dropped the email. I've dropped the link in the chat section. So the link to the GitHub repository and recordings of all the sessions will be shared there. So also a project will be given to everybody. So please do well to go through the project and complete it so that you can get your certification and you can actually certify yourself that okay, I have practical experience building AI agent because for you to actually submit your project, you have to go to the repository and make a pull request. So actually go through your pull and evaluate what your agent is doing, the function calls and everything. So in the absence of any other question, I would say thank you so much everybody who has joined us from day one and up to this particular day. This is not the last day for our session, even if it was supposed to end today, but we have extended sessions. The date, time, and everything will be communicated with you. So at this moment, we are going to end the session here. Thank you everybody for joining. You can continue the discussion in the group chats. If you have any question, you can send an email directly to tensorflowcommunityu@gmail.com. I think that is all for today. So do have a great day.